Right, so I don't often pass comment on Prime Minister's questions much anymore. These pointless exchanges between one Tory and another, as they are these days, where one asks the other a question and the other doesn't answer it. Tedious in the extreme, quite frankly. Both Sunak and Starmer trying to outsmarm each other, both of whom about as appealing as a week full of Monday mornings. But this last one, before they all swan off on their summer holidays as if the country's running perfectly fine and there's not a problem in the world that they need to deal with, had both Tory parties held to account, both red and blue alike, and it came courtesy of SNP Westminster spokesman Stephen Flynn, taking both of them to task over their support for child poverty, in the case of Starmer earning him the nickname Sir Kid Starver. You expect the Conservatives to believe in such abjectly cruel policies, after all, as the two-child benefit cap, a direct contributor to the levels of child poverty in the country that we face. But for Labour to now support it too, in their refusal to axe it, as they had previously promised, because they've decided they can't find the money now, even though they have a literal printing press called the Bank of England, it's an excuse and a fiscal choice, not a reason. And frankly, it should be beyond question that we don't want kids starving in this country. Sunak ought to have his own nickname for his support for child poverty, really, as well. In all fairness, I suppose it is a Tory policy, after all. I came up with Kiddie No Snacks, but it's not as good as Sir Kid Starver, which deserves to stick to Starmer now for life. Flynn took both No Snacks and Starver to task when it came to his turn to ask questions of the Prime Minister by saying the two-child benefit cap, as introduced by the Conservative Party, has left 250,000 children living in poverty. So can I ask the Prime Minister, does he take comfort in knowing that the heinous legacy of that policy will now no longer be protected by Conservative members, but by Labour members too? Cleverly done. PMQs his questions to the Prime Minister, of course, but a solid swipe at Starmer whilst he was at it. Now, Sunak wasn't going to pass up the open goal Flynn had served him, though. He doesn't give a stuff about starving kids. He's a Tory. They brought in and maintained this policy, of course, and Labour MPs should be ashamed of their acquiescence over this. But, of course, Rishi No Snacks will have a go anyway. He stood up and replied, I welcome the Labour leader's newfound support for our policy, even though he had previously committed to a different approach. But what I would say to the honourable gentleman, and indeed the Labour front bench, is that they don't have to worry too much, because given the Labour leader's track record, he's never actually kept a promise that he's made. As I said, open goal. And far be it from me to willingly agree with a Tory, but the ongoing dishonesty of Keir Starmer is going to keep being drawn attention to. And as Starmer goes back on his word more and more, as he will almost certainly continue to do, because it has become his defining trait after all, making those who support him and the claims they make about him bringing change when every policy to do that gets dumped, all the more hollow and pathetic. Flynn, of course, had another question, and as is typical, issues a response to the previous question, or previous answer, or whatever passed for an answer that he might have been given, based on the Prime Minister's reply. And so he responded by saying, voters in Scotland are used to child poverty under the Tories. They almost expect it. But what they don't expect is child poverty support from the Labour Party. And if we look very closely right now, there is a shiver running along the Labour front bench looking for a spine. But does this not tell us something much bigger? That for children living in poverty in Scotland, Westminster offers them no real change. It offers them no real change and no real hope. He's absolutely right, of course, though that isn't exclusively confined to Scotland. Starmer's face was notable on two occasions during this exchange, though. He literally choked when Sunak thanked him for his support of their child poverty policy. I can only imagine he was overcome with emotion at Sunak's gratitude. And later, when Stephen Flynn said that people in Scotland don't expect child poverty support from the Labour Party, Starmer was gurning and laughing about it. Note the faces of the two women sat next to him there, though. Lucy Powell, looking like Flynn was a cat that had just hacked up a hairball in the middle of Parliament, even though that's the face I was actually pulling when she said the reason child poverty has to stay, including in her Manchester constituency, where child poverty happens to be at 42%, is because, as the Tories have been saying about Labour for the last 13 years, there's no money left. And the other side of her is Angela Rayner, dead-eyed Ange, looking like she'd wish the earth would open up and swallow her whole, sat in silence, just as she apparently did at the recent Labour MP showdown with Sir Kid Starver, which ended up in a show of exactly what Stephen Flynn said of the Labour front bench, a shiver looking for a spine. There is no appetite to challenge Starmer, whether it be down to fear, whether it be down to not wishing to damage the current party polling lead, not that many of were bothered by that when a certain chap called Jeremy Corbyn led the party, a man who did commit to scrapping this evil child poverty policy and believing that investment in our kids was a worthwhile thing to spend public money on. Flynn's figures that he quoted were also an underestimate, though. He said 250,000 children were in poverty. Actually, this is the number of children that would be lifted out of poverty if this policy got scrapped, and it would be immediate. 4.3 million kids actually currently live in poverty. Of those, another 1.5 million would have their lives dramatically improved by the scrapping of this. So even scrapping the policy itself wouldn't on its own fix the issue in and of itself, but it does go a long way towards it. Economically, the savings on parents not being able to work, having more money to spend, less drain on other areas such as health and well-being, would actually save the country some £40 billion. Kicking larger families for being larger actually costs us all the more in the long run, whatever you think of this issue. But above all, nobody, however they look at this, can and should justify punishing the kids with hunger. That both the Tories and Labour back this policy shows neither are a party anyone with any kind of a social conscience should be backing. Stephen Flynn offered up a massive burn to Starmer. Everyone still supporting him should feel their cheeks burning over it too, out of shame. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this video useful. Please do like, share and subscribe to the channel if you did. More content out daily. Meanwhile, here's a video recommendation for you where Sir Kid Starver has now managed to get himself directly compared to Margaret Thatcher, the milk snatcher, over this issue. And I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.